Welcome to the Business Talk podcast. I am your host Deepak. In today's episode, we are honored to have two distinguished guests, Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan and Mr. Hrishikesh Bhattacharya. With a remarkable career spanning over 5 decades, Mr. Gopalakrishnan is not only a renowned business leader, but also a prolific author and thought leader in the realm of corporate strategy and leadership. His experience as a top executive at Tata Sons and Hindustan Unilever has provided him with a profound insights into the complexity of business transformation. Our second guest in this episode and co-author of the book is the esteemed Mr. Hrishikesh Bhattacharya, a distinguished management consultant, author, and a teacher. Mr. Bhattacharya brings deep expertise in competitive dynamics and strategic foresight. His extensive experience in advising organizations through complex challenges has earned him a respected voice in the world of business strategy. Today, we will be exploring the insights and strategies from their latest book, discussing the critical role of leadership, culture, and foresight in driving successful transformation. Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan and Mr. Hrishikesh Bhattacharya, thank you for accepting our request. It's a true delight to have you both on this podcast.
Thank you.
My first question to Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan. Sir, could you share the origin story of your book, Embrace the Future, and enlighten how Mr. Hrishikesh Bhattacharya, a distinguished management consultant, author, and teacher with a deep understanding of organizational transformation and strategic foresight, became involved in this project?
Well, it was like many things in life. There's a bit of coincidence or accident, whatever you want to call it. I was struck by the fact that during my own career, what seemed like an occasional event, Hindustan Unilever would announce some reorganization of sales forces, of some business portfolio. In the latter part of my career, it started to seem to be very much more frequent. And as I developed my career, obviously I reached a little higher positions in due course. I myself was involved in something that seemed to be happening far more frequently. And I realized that the major obstacle in implementing transformation programs is not the head part, but the heart part. Because you have to carry people with you. You think your logic is impeccable, others don't think so, and so on and so forth. While I was tossing around with this in my head, you must remember that although Rishi and I are very good friends and colleagues for 50 years, he has been away in Chicago, I've been here for the last 25 years. We speak occasionally. In one such occasional chat, when I said this to him, he said, no, but the real problem is that people don't know what they want to do. And then we got into a little discussion whether what to do is important or how to do it is important. And as good friends, we could argue without any misunderstanding. And then we suddenly realized that we are arguing about nothing because both are important. And at that stage, the thought passed my mind that can we not do a book? Because in the marketplace, there are fantastic authors whom we have acknowledged in our book, by the way, Michael Porter, and Clayton Christensen, many others, who have written on the what to do. And there are other behavioral specialists who have written on the how to do, like Jim Collins and so on. So we said, let's have one book which is practical, which is set in the Indian context a bit, but without losing sight of the global context. And can we put together a practical book for real managers who are dealing with this day to day, rather than somebody having to attend an advanced management program somewhere, though they are not quite something. So that's the background. I don't know if Rishi wants to add anything, but I think that's the way I perceive it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's how it happened.
Yeah. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, what inspired you to explore the idea of business transformation as a soft science? And how does this perspective differ from traditional approach to business strategy?
I don't know if there's a single traditional approach. There are lots of books on strategy, and they're damn good books, by the way. And some of them have been professors, and I've even attended their classes. They've been my teachers. And there are others who say that it's the soft part that is very important. And I was on the more prone to the soft side. And in my discussion with Rishi, I found that he had, if I might use that expression, through his own academic work, teaching and consulting, become a bit more on the hard side. So it was not 100-0, but 60-40 and 40-60. And I took on the part that I felt a little more inclined towards, and he took on the part that he was more inclined. All that we did together was to make sure that it flowed. It should not look like a jerky book, or two books written with one cover. And so I took the soft side, and Rishi had been teaching this in a not inconsequential institution sitting in the US, and had been doing consulting. So he had some really solid stuff for him to contribute. So we didn't call it the hard and the soft stuff, but we just call it the soft science, because science is thought of to be rational and hard. And that was the Rishi's part.
Yeah. Mr. Hrishikesh Bhattacharya, in Embrace the Future, you emphasize the role of leadership in driving transformation. Can you share some key qualities that leaders must possess to effectively guide organizations through change?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that a lot of business and a lot of transformational side of business is all about leadership. Leadership is at the forefront. And a lot of things about leadership confuses people as to what is it? Is it extroverts who are better leaders, or introverts, or people with high energy? What actually leadership is about? Both of us who have been in business for a long time believe that leadership is about behavior. It is not about traits. And when it comes to behavior, if you look at big, important political leaders, country leaders, starting from Mahatma Gandhi, Abraham Lincoln, FDR, later on Bill Clinton, Nelson Mandela on the one side. And then you look at great business leaders like our own Jamshedji Tata, and then people like Henry Ford, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos. These are famous names. When you think about these two types of leaders, political as well as business, you find that commonalities are a huge part of both of them. And what are these commonalities? When you think about their commonalities, you find that all of them have great knowledge of the past, of history. They have appreciation of culture. They are able to manage the present. And very importantly, they have great ambition for the future. When all these four things come together, that is about the behavioral aspects of leadership, and that works at a country level as well as at a business level. The other commonality, which is probably the most important, is that all of them have a purpose. They are driving themselves behind some ambition, and that purpose they know how to implement. So that, in our view, is what leadership is about.
Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan, how does strategic foresight play a role in anticipating future challenges and opportunities? Can you provide an example of how this has been successfully applied in business context?
One of the dangers in management is you get rather high-sounding words, and different people have different nuances. They approximately mean the right thing. And strategic foresight can be one such thing. There can be a whole book defining what it is. But if I might use an Indian expression, aapka niyat kya hai? What is your intent? Which is what we mean by strategic foresight. And the example I would like to quote you is from about 30 years ago. I was in Hindustan Unilever at that time. And as you know, liberalization happened in 1991. And Sushil Datta was the chairman. This is narrated in the book, by the way, what I'm about to tell you now. And he sat down with his team and asked them, what should be our vision for the future, what should be our mission, all the right questions. Some consultant, I think in this case Sumantro Ghoshal was involved, helped them along, and they came to a certain set of actions. Ratan Tata, whom I did not know at that time, was doing the same thing, just 1.5 kilometers away in Bombay House. And 7 years later, I joined from here to there. And I could therefore contrast, not in a critical way, but with a critical eye, what each person had done. And luckily, both of them have prospered after liberalization and have done well. So one must assume that they were tapping the right buttons. But their styles were very different. But their strategic foresight, what was common in both cases, was we have been successful so far, but this is not the way we are going to succeed in the future. What we need to do is to change 3 things or 4 things. Those are mentioned in the book, so I won't go through that. And one of the common things was they said we must have a business excellence system. Because if you don't have an overall excellence system which cuts across divisions, business units, factories, sales branches, how do you know you're going to improve? So it's like you may do very well in geography in school and get very poor marks in Hindi, and on the whole you're doing well, but you must have some way to measure it. And in the case of Hindustan Lever, they adopted the TPM method in their factories. And in the case of Tata's, they adopted the Tata Business Excellence model based on Malcolm model. And to both of them, and I've described that very briefly in the book, it gave the right dividends because they were converting their strategic foresight that what worked for us in the past will not work for us in the future. Hindustan Lever doubled its volume or made it 3 times its volume within a period of 7-8 years. And I think Tata's, of course, is far more visible in the public domain, so I will not go into that. So for me, strategic foresight is a very important part. Strategic intent, some people call it. Some people call it vision. And I'm sure there are subtle differences, but I'm not going into that for the purpose of answering your question.
Okay, sir. Yeah. Mr. Bhattacharya, now the question is for you. The book discusses the importance of understanding cultural dynamics in transformation efforts. How can organizations ensure that their culture align with their strategic goals during periods of change?
Successful transformation comes from a blend of mind and heart. We have emphasized this a number of times, and you started the discussion with that. What is the soft part and what is the science part? So these have to be blended, and the culture of a company is either supports that or it hinders that. So how do you understand culture? I think culture in our way of thinking is the collective people mindset in a company. That is what we think culture is about. And some companies or some people in their country, it's all about people, it's about feelings, it's about your values. And what people in certain companies, we find that they are outward looking by nature. They are customer centric. They are ambitious in their target setting. They believe in new technology. They collaborate both inside and outside. And they have the confidence to take on competition. So these are some of the traits, these are some of the cultures that drive certain types of companies. We also see the opposite. And maybe the opposites are in a majority where people are inward looking, they are scared of competition, they are not ambitious. They want to set their targets based on budgets rather than with ambition. When that happens, you can see now from these 2 sets of attitudes that people have that some are going to be more easily achieve transformation and some will find it very difficult to do so. So in our experience, we have found that companies that are not quite aligned with the way the future is wanting to be sort of established, you have to go through a pre-period of cultural change If you just jump into it without taking that into account, then the people side go wrong, and then the transformation is unsuccessful.
Yeah. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, can you share a case study from the book that illustrates the successful application of soft science principles in business transformation?
Well, I'll give you two case studies. But since I'm giving you two for the price of one, I will be brief because they are described in the book.
Sure.
At some stage.
Sure, sir.
You know, Rishi and I joined about the same time in our early 20s. And like all young people, we thought we knew the mumbo jumbo of management. And sometimes amongst ourselves in our peer group, we would speak not so creditably of some of our seniors when they were doing their work. It happens to all young people. But 10 years later, or 15 years later, Rishi was the marketing head of the tea business, Lipton, called Lipton at that time. And I was in Hindustan Lever, heading the oil, dairy fats, dairy and animal feed business. And the company board of Lipton India, which is a separate company, and Hindustan Lever, which is a separate company, they were brothers because they were both owned by the same father, okay, due to some global acquisition. Decided that it would be a good idea to transfer the business I was running, oils, fats, into Lipton. Now you have to think back at, this is what, early 80s. Lipton was in deep trouble. Mid-80s. Lipton was in quite a lot of trouble for a variety of historical reasons and was a very Calcutta-based Boxwala company, right? The Dalda business and the ghee business in Bombay was a very Telia business, very Guju orientated, very fast trading orientated, and was a Bombay-based business. While we could work out the maths, and there was always an accountant to help us and a lawyer to tell us how do you shift the business from, you want to shift the business from Hindustan Lever to Lipton, but that doesn't mean you have to shift everybody in the foods business to Calcutta. Well, nobody wanted to go to Calcutta. In those days, there was a lot of political and union problems. And in our discussions, we came to the conclusion that you cannot get the final thing in one step. It will be multiple steps. And the final recommendation we made, I'm cutting a long story short, after a lot of argument amongst ourselves, there was a third member of our committee, was shifted to Bangalore. And that's exactly what was done. And gradually people migrated to Bangalore. In those days, Bangalore wasn't the big city to go to. Everybody was thinking of Calcutta and Bombay in the old days. So I'm giving an example of something where intellectually we were young in our mid-30s. We accepted a less than optimum intellectual solution to make it practical to implement. Whereas most of us are trained that you must get the perfect solution and implement it perfectly. And life doesn't actually work that way. So that's one. And the second I want to example is from Tata, where I wasn't directly involved, but when liberalization happened, Jamshed Irani, my former colleague, had to cut the manpower size in Tata Steel from about 95,000 to 35,000. I mean, it was a brute thing. And your whole business was in a Jamshedpur, a steel town factory. There's no other work in Jamshedpur for people to do. They could go to 10 other factories. And Jamshed Irani, who was a very strong metallurgical engineer, geologist, metallurgical engineer, who's very logical and rational, found that to sell the idea and to make it happen, he had to learn a lot of the soft skills. And he has written about it himself in his book, but since I was sitting on the side and watching, that's the second thing where the importance of soft skills came. And there are lots of little episodes which I can quote as examples, but I shan't indulge in them. Both were very good examples that if you're not clear what you want to do, then figuring out how to do it is not of much help. But if you figured out how to do it and don't know what you want to do, that's also not of much help. So you need to take these both and move left foot forward, right foot forward, left foot forward, right foot forward. And if you think you go in a straight line, life doesn't work that way. So thoda zoom ke pahunch jate. So those are the two examples I'd like to quote to you.
Yeah. Very insightful. Mr. Bhattacharya, what are some common challenges or pitfalls that organizations face when attempting to transform, and how can be mitigated?
Yeah, what I'm going to say first might sound a little odd because it is in our today's days of artificial intelligence and data-driven everything. One of the most common pitfalls is excessively hard data-driven approaches. Because the thing about data is that if it has to be hard, if it has to be really true, then it can only bring you to the present. It has to stop at the present. After that, it's all extrapolation. After that, it is all the next day is the future. It is not, and there is no data for the next day. So when you are excessively data driven, you get caught into the past and into the present, and you have difficulty in breaking out into the future. So that's one very important thing that managers have to learn, that they have to move away from extrapolation. They have to move away from the present to the future. Certain amount of their time has to go into thinking about the future. But when they think about the future, they often enter into a budgeting mindset. कि last year 2% growth हुआ था, तो इस साल भी let's think about maybe 2.5%. We are going to be ambitious. So they come from 2 to 2.5. But they do not think about an inflection point that might be taking place or is capable of taking place within the industry in which you are operating. Similarly, in our book, we have explained a sort of a model that we have practiced in our consulting work, where we have advised people that you have to look at societal changes. You have to look at technologies of the future that are getting commercialized at this point in time, and the importance of business systems that are changing. Each of these are capable of spawning new businesses or expanding your current business, or to allow you to break away from your current industry to adjacent industries, for example. These are soft aspects of planning, soft aspects of thinking. And what we have to do is that we have to amplify the soft signals like these with the hard data that is coming from the past. And it's only when you combine this that you become more successful. And the last part I would like to say is that people tend to be risk averse. There is fear of failure, and which is also a concern, or fear of the future. So lacking a winning mindset is probably the most important thing that affects you in terms of the pitfalls that companies do end up with.
Yeah. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, looking at what emerging trends do you believe will most significantly impact the future of business transformation, and how should companies prepare for them?
I'd like to take off the interest of continuity and hopefully value addition from a listener's point of view, from where Rishi left off. I think we have covered sufficiently that you must cover both the soft and the hard part, and they are intertwined, right? And I think the challenge really in the future is how to intertwine and what to intertwine. On the one hand, future leaders are finding and will continue to find increasingly a very fast pace of change in technologies. So while I may be a kirana merchant in Ahmedabad, selling for the last 50 years in a particular way, when e-commerce comes, either I have to learn or I have to allow my grandson who's come back from the US to go into e-commerce. I mean, forget about the Lalaji sitting on a gaddi. Even people like us 50 years ago could not imagine that you could click some buttons and get dal chawal and roti or even cooked food in your house. So the first thing is that we have to be respectful. But the danger that we have there is respect can become awe. You can be actually fascinated with it. Just like if you see a very beautiful woman, you may be respectful and admire her beauty, but you should not convert it into an obsession. Technology can become an obsession. And all these words, AI, EV, they are very important, don't get me wrong. But if you get obsessed with it, it's gone to a fault. So you have to comprehend it and have people around you who can help you to comprehend. And it is very important for a leader to be able to say, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you repeat it? That's on the hard side. On the soft side, at the end of the day, whatever automation happens, whatever technology and what, natural intelligence, human intuition, human judgment will always play a role. It's a mistake to think that technology is of no use, as much of a mistake to think that judgment is of no use. And therefore, I call it 4 intelligences are required on the soft side. Traditionally, we have always thought of IQ as very important. So people would try to go to top schools, top colleges. They would go through entrance exam. They would do CAT, MAT, all that sort of stuff. When Hindustan Lever or Tata would recruit, they would look for the brightest of them. IQ, high IQ. But within 10 years, you find that IQ by itself won't get you, because you have to lead people, and that requires EQ. Management specialists have invented words for these, so it makes it easy to discuss it. Emotional quotient. Sabash beta, well done. Nahi beta, aise nahi karte, aise karte hain. All that is part of EQ. But in the last 30 years, something called AQ has come out, adaptability quotient. So you may be very fit, but that doesn't mean that you can do a Kuchipudi dance or a Bharatanatyam dance. Fitness, as distinct from muscular agility, is different. And companies also have muscular agility. And I would say the last 20 years, academics have defined something called SQ, spirituality quotient. And spirituality, I'm not saying religious quotient. Don't get me wrong, you're sitting in Ahmedabad, I must be careful not to get converted into religion. It is spiritual. Spirituality means finding meaning in your work. Why am I doing all this? सब लोग तो दफ्तर जाते हैं, सब लोग वापस आते हैं, सब लोग तनख्वाह लेते हैं. And Tata is a very good example, where Tata says, I'm doing this because I want to give back to society more profit. And that gives people a meaning in their life, right? Other companies also do it. I'm quoting Tata only because that comes to my mind more readily. So on the soft side, you need IQ plus EQ plus AQ plus SQ. Now this looks like quite a menu. ESG, EV, AI on the left side, AQ, SQ on the other side. And you have to put it together and make a good undio out of it. And that is the challenge for leadership. But I think managers are smart people. They are not dumbos. I'm only cautioning that when you go to attend leadership programs, people will use all these words, and you may chase one of these girls and forget the other girls. You must chase all the girls. Then you get a more holistic view of what beauty is. And that's the challenge of leadership.
Mr. Gopalakrishnan, one personal question. How this book is different from your other, 19 or 20 books?
All my books are thematically, although people think of them as management books, in my view, they are not management books. They are lessons of life. Now, Embrace the Future happens in companies, it happens in families, it happens in family managed businesses, it happens in government, in public space. So, the lessons are the same. So, I think the important thing that I want to emphasize is, if you regard it as a lesson of life, but the examples that people like Rishi and I can quote are taken from our experience, which happens to be in the commercial world. If we were scientists, we will talk of Embrace the Future in terms of patents and new technology and, licensing it and so on. So this is yet another facet. And I divide all my 19-20 books now into 4 categories. There are books on wisdom, and there are XYZ books. There are books on self-development. They are ABC books. There are books on shaping institutions. They are ABC books. So I've got all my 20 books put into 4 categories, say on an average of 5 books. This is just an addition to the wisdom part. In my wisdom books, I've covered human intuition, I've covered self-awareness, I've covered intuition in the boardroom, and this is one more. For me, these are different facets of institution, of human wisdom.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalakrishnan. Now, my last question is for both of you. What are the top 3 practical takeaways you hope readers will gain from the Embrace the Future?
Well, I'll give you my list of 3, and Gopal might want to add to it. But I'll give you 3 that we think, on behalf of both of us, I'm saying this. I think the first one is to express a belief that the future is as important as the present. At least as important as the present. It might be even more important. Because if you don't have a future, what are you working for? That's number 1. The second, I think, is that with the right mindset and the right framework of thinking, one can shape the future for your business, and it can shape it to your ambition. So future is not completely unknown or unachievable. If your ambition, if you are clear that you want to do something, you can actually get there. And third is that in order to do it, you need the right blend of mind and heart. These are the 3 lessons that we want to propagate, and we also learned as we were writing the book.
Thank you, Mr. Bhattacharya. Mr. Gopalakrishnan.
Well, I'm going to say about similar things, but in a different way. The first is to be aware. The second is to accept imperfection. And the third is to do and learn. So let me explain. Being aware. I can tell you from my personal experience, I've had this experience. When I feel I've now reached some good position, life is carrying on. If I can just move the needle by another 5, 10, 15, 20%, keep my bosses happy, gaadi chalta rahega. That's an acceptable way to do your job, but it's not an acceptable way for the institution to be embarking on the future. So being aware is to be alert. It's like at 8:30, 9 in the evening after my dinner, I feel a bit sleepy. And I'm entitled to sleep. But I should be alert, because if my child is crying in the next room or somebody rings up and says, I have a problem. So alertness and self-awareness is the first message. And if you're alert and self-aware, there'll always be things to do to change. They may be small, they may be big. The second is accepting imperfection. Because you have come up in your career because you learned a perfect way to do it. How to improve productivity from 10 tons per hour to 15 tons per hour. How to improve the number of salesman's calls from 30 to 35. You did something, you implemented it and it worked. Or it didn't work and you learned from that mistake. The same thing applies to this. Because organizational transformation and being prepared for the future looks so macro, you feel the company is being threatened. You may be frozen into interaction. And that's the danger. So if you can be aware and be alert. Second, accept mistakes and imperfection. And third, do and learn. And the best example I can give you, which is from the public domain, is how India adopted, what India did after partition. I mean, that's a story out in the public domain. Nobody had experience of how to make a partition of a country. We made a lot of mistakes, which politically or intellectually you can argue about. But of all our neighbors, we are the only ones who, not a perfect democracy, but mota moti, have still maintained elections, democracy, institutions, None of our neighbors on the left, right, top, bottom can say that. And this is a very good example. Take the example of accepting Hindi as a national language. You tried all the other methods. You give a fatwa, it doesn't work. Then you allowed Hindi film industry, boy meeting girl, running around trees, singing Hindi songs, and things have moved. So time is a big resource in embracing the future. Whereas I have come up in my career, and I think I can say that for Rishi also, because you could find out what is to be done, did it within 1 year or 2 years, delivered better returns, and your boss got impressed and he promoted you. इसमें ऐसा नहीं चलता है. And a public example, again I'm quoting from, is Starbucks, which is in the US company, as you know. They've had their fourth CEO in 4 years. I mean, and you ask, what the hell are they doing? Once in a while we can make a mistake, but you can't do 4 mistakes in 6 years. And that's because you're wanting share price to be the indicator for embracing the future. Share price is probably the worst indicator of embracing the future. Share price is a very good example of embracing the past. Now I'm making a rather exceptional statement, but I'm saying it in the context that there has to be a sequence in this, and there has to be some element of patience. You can't change India and make it like Singapore by having a Lee Kuan Yew running India. The Indian cricket team took 50 years to get the World Cup again, or 40 years, whatever. So these things take time. And I think if you can follow these, my message is, you're truly embracing the future. If you're looking for quick fixes, then it's like repairing your grandfather's house and finding every 3 years you have to do something. And that's the message I think Rishi and I, without being preachy, we are trying to convey. That if you thought about what you want to do and you find out the right way to do it and you give yourself that time, then you're really embracing the future.
Very, very profound thought. So as we wrap up today's episode, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our distinguished guests for their insightful discussion on Embrace the Future, the soft science of business transformation. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay connected for more engaging conversations and groundbreaking insights. Keep exploring, stay curious, and embrace the future. Thank you so much, Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan and Mr. Hrishikesh Bhattacharya.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good luck to you and all your listeners, and take care of yourselves in the Gujarat monsoon time now. Okay?
Thank you, sir.